Welcome to Spirit Baby Radio. I am your host, Kelly Meehan, a citizen of the universe and a passage keeper and mentor for our new Earth children. I believe we are entering into a new psychic structure of our reality, and it is meant to embody deeper trust and ways into solid self-love and fearless integrity. Our new world energy of spirit babies needs us to consciously create within conception, trust pregnancy, and have freedom to birth and parent from innate wisdom. This is Spirit Baby Radio. Welcome to episode 251, August 2026. Peace on Earth begins at birth. The global contributions of birth psychology. What is birth psychology? What is APPPAH? How can we collectively continue to support this expanding field? What positive changes are coming? I have two special guests today, and I'm so excited. We were just talking so much before the conversation. We're like, wait, we need to record this. Welcome, Wendy and Ashley.
Thank you so much, Kelly. We're so glad to be here. We're so excited to chat about all things birth psychology, all things like pre and perinatal psychology. And I think how Ashley and I use this in our personal, professional lives outside of APPPAH in our own communities. And I'm just excited to be here with you.
Yes.
Well, thank you. And I always go into how we've met. And I feel like I don't know the moment we all met, but I was just sharing that I've learned about APPA, like birth psychology, 18 years ago in my studies. And I was so in infancy for me, and I wasn't really in the field, but I met a lot of amazing people. And through the years, and these ladies know I talk so highly of birth psychology in that field. And as we're going to get into, I'm going to read both of your sweet here bios, and I want to jump in after that and I want to hear your heart. Like, here, I'm going to prepare you. Like, why birth psychology? Like, what really brought you both into that space? And let me just share um, I'll start with you, Ashley. Ashley, I don't know how to say your last name. Can you say it for me?
Yeah, it's actually Makan. It's actually of Arabic origin, and it means the place. I just
I
think
love
it's
it.
beautiful because my
I would have
maiden
said it
name
wrong.
is so boring. So it's like I have a unique last name finally.
I love it. Ashley Aiken is the Executive Director of APPA, and we'll tell you what that is in a moment. What is APPA? A prenatal and perinatal educator, full spectrum doula, Reiki Master teacher, and advocate for the field of birth psychology. Her work traces the formative influence of our earliest beginnings, where body, psyche, birth, and belonging first take shape, and explores how these fundamental experiences ripple outward into embodiment, relationships, and the architecture of culture itself. And I have here also Wendy Bruns, right?
Bruns,
Oh,
yeah.
close. Wendy Bruns is APPA's Outreach Communications Director and a passionate advocate for expanding public awareness of prenatal and perinatal psychology. Through her work with APPA, she helps bring the science and wisdom of birth psychology into broader conversation with families, professionals, and communities. Outside of APPA, Wendy is heavily integrated into her local community as a doula, educator, and placenta specialist. She truly believes the community is central to fostering the healthiest beginnings and the peace on earth begins before birth. Well, thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you.
So I'm just gonna grab you, Ashley.
Yeah.
Birth psychology, like where's the passion heart? Like yeah, why?
Well, first, let's talk a little bit about what is birth psychology. Prenatal and perinatal psychology is essentially a multidisciplinary study of the earliest human experience. So, from preconception through the first few years of life. And we're studying attachment, epigenetics, affect regulation, and neuroscience all combined to see how we develop as humans. And ultimately, this shows us how we will perceive life moving forward, physically and emotionally, how we perceive the world around us, and how we respond physically within our bodies, even down to our long-term illnesses as we get older, you know. So it's something that really truly applies to anyone who's ever been born, and it's why it's become my favorite subject. But I never expected to be in this field. My background was in spa management years and years ago. And I guess to begin my journey, I have to start with my early 20s. I had a late term loss in my early 20s, and it was extremely traumatic for me. I was going through the standard American medical system, not knowing that there were other options. And I lost my baby at 19 weeks, and I was devastated. I remember being so surprised by the disconnection between me and my baby that I experienced in that process, and no one wanted to talk about it. I went to my 6-week postpartum appointment. My doctor was like, "Oh, your body looks great. Do you want any psych meds?" And I was like, at 21, I'm not allowed to feel this. So I buried it. I became very good at business, and years later, I eventually had to seek some therapy to move through the grief process involving all of that and understanding myself and all of those pieces. But when I had my daughter, nearly a decade after that, I had been in the spa industry for a while, and I had been in management. I was hiring and firing, and I was like, I don't like this. I miss the connection piece. I'm not going back to work until I'm working for myself. And I went through the birth process in a very serious way. I experienced pregnancy after a loss during a time when we weren't really discovering or discussing any of this. And I felt very alone in my experience and very controlled in my experience. And I chose out-of-hospital birth with out-of-hospital midwives, and I took the childbirth classes that they told me to take in my 3rd trimester. And I took it like a college course with my checklists and all of my preparation. And I remember moving through that process, and the moment I went into labor, the rug pulled right out from underneath me. Hypnosis was not going to work for my brain at that time. And I had a really crazy, beautiful, transformative experience. And I walked out of that thinking, why didn't we talk about the psychology surrounding this transition? And that was the part that really blew my mind, because I was like, that was a trip. And I was not given any information about postpartum outside of base level healing supplies. And I'm like, I feel like, I don't know if you've ever read Kafka's Metamorphosis, but I feel like a bug, like I'm a giant bug. How do I reintegrate into life right now? And that's when I started reading everything that I could about postpartum, the transition, motherhood, the psychology of all of this. And about 2 years later, my husband looked at me and said, "Look at your bookshelf over here. I think you need to do something with that." And that's when I stepped into doula work. And essentially, I started doing base level doula work. I wanted to go deeper. I had a background in the spa industry, so I wanted to offer a greater level of depth than what was being offered in my community at the time. And I wanted to offer some educational components that were not available for me when I was moving through this process. So I started looking everywhere for childbirth education programs, something that integrated psychology, and I couldn't find anything. And right after I threw my hands up and just decided to get with my bookshelf and create something on my own, I found APPPAH. And APPPAH just kind of fell into my lap. So I'm going to pause on my story there to tell you what APPPAH is, because that's going to help us a bit. APPPAH is the Association for Prenatal and Perinatal Psychology and Health, and Wendy will very likely expand on this in a moment. But they have been around for over 40 years, 44 years at this point. We have an academic journal, and we're steeped in information and science that's over 100 years in the making, and it's just expanding daily, and it's fascinating, and it's something that I feel like should be taught to every human because we are all humans and we all move through this process, and how we move through this process affects how we move through life forever, how we parent, how we connect, all of those pieces. So I dove in. We have a prenatal and perinatal educator program. It's 185 hours. It was as deep as my nerd self wanted to go. And I was like, I'm going to learn information and disseminate into my community. And I had no idea that it was going to change everything about my life, how I talk to myself and how I parent my daughter, how I connect with my clients, and how I integrate that within my community. And as I started integrating this work into my work as a birth doula at the time, I started noticing anecdotal shifts in my clients' outcomes, like
Mm.
dramatically. And I was like, this is base level emotional connection support. Like, I'm not clinical. How is this shifting the outcomes? And that was the beginning of the itch for me. It just never ended.
Yeah, so
So
something you said, I want to go back because there's so many
yeah.
great things you're saying. So you have this really extreme birth loss, and then a decade later, interesting, a lot of healing, maybe
Mm-hmm.
even suppression, and then you have your earth child here. And then I love what you said about like, hey, look at all these your partner, look at all these books on the shelf. Maybe there's something there. So
Yeah.
do you feel like in that time you were not into the birth until after the birth of your child or pregnancy? I may have missed if you said what was the
I
moment?
my first exposure to birth in general, to the physiology of my body, which I have deeply integrated into my work because as a doula, as somebody who started as a doula and is studying midwifery, I have found that the earlier we go, the earlier I want to go with people. And that ultimately comes into understanding how your body operates as a woman. And I'm
Mm,
from the deep
mm,
south. Those conversations are very taboo, and I really didn't get a lot of exposure unless you're
mm.
taking physiology for a
Yeah.
college level, some kind of a medical degree. You're not getting that exposure in high school and college outside of the base level stuff. So I remember taking my childbirth class and telling all of my friends about what I was learning about how magical our bodies
And what
were.
they say, what did they
And they were
think?
like, that's interesting. You should go be a doula or something. And I was like,
Oh,
no. And here
you're
I
like,
am.
that's not me.
Yeah, so I fell in love with the capacity and power behind what our bodies are capable of. And that was the beginning of that for me. And I've always been interested in psychology. I never knew that something called birth psychology existed though. So that was
I
really
love
fun
what
to
you shared there is like I know that feeling of like it's so exciting to talk about like I know we can sit here and literally talk hours about
yeah.
birth and trauma healing and
Mm-hmm.
mother and father like we can just and it's just funny your friends are all like okay maybe there's something there for you.
Yeah, they're like, you
They're
have fun with
reflecting it
that,
back.
which I've learned many times
Yeah.
over the years as a neurospicy lady that I just have to understand that my deep dives are my deep dives, and sometimes I can pull somebody aside at the party and get them into birth psychology with me.
Oh
But
my gosh. Like if I start talking about anything pregnancy, birth, at conception in any little group, it
yeah,
literally becomes this whole huge conversation.
exactly.
Sometimes my husband looks over and he goes, "Oh, she's in one of those
Is it
moments."
what we're
Like
talking about again? Yep.
I was like, "Hey, I didn't bring it up." I even tell people, I was like, "Well, you got me going. Like I'm gonna keep going." Like I literally
Yep.
tell people, how far do you want to go with this?" Because
How deep do you
I'll
want to
like,
go?
yeah,
Yeah, that's
I'm
the
gonna keep
precursor for me.
because like you said, birth psychology is that like it is a foundational, we're all born. And
Hmm.
so how powerful is that? It's like I agree with you is that we should know these things. Like I grew up not knowing anything and it was very traumatic because I had a lot of stuff come through in my body, in my own birth. Like that was very activating because of how I was born. And we don't
Yeah,
look at that. And I'm not telling people we're going to get obsessive and look at every little corner. And,
yeah,
it's more of like, oh, I was born. What's that connection? And how is it affecting my future outcomes of bringing children in?
yeah,
And so yeah, I get that. Like I think our goal here a lot we talk about is is bringing birth psychology more to mass consciousness. So thank you,
Mhm.
Ashley. I want to hear Wendy, like yeah, like what you're just, yeah, how you got into this and what it's been for you.
Yeah, well, it's kind of funny, Kelly, that you just brought up coming from, a household where you didn't know much about your own birth. I had the complete opposite experience where my family, my mom and dad, loved to share my birth story. We talked about my brother, I have an older brother, and then I have a younger sister, and we all three had very different birth experiences. And I always thought that that was very normal. I have a couple of very best friends that we've been friends since we were 5 years old, and they all know our birth stories of my family and my brother and sister, and we laugh about it. And I just thought that that was really normal. I thought that it was so normal to know your own birth experience, and I think, now that I'm able to look back, I think it was really helpful to know pieces of my birth story that have played out into my experience as a grown up, right? Ashley, I want to touch back on something where you were going into like what APPA is and what we do as an organization, and you hit it in such this beautiful way where you're talking about the multidisciplinary aspect, and I really love that piece of it. And I think when I'm talking about APPA, when I'm sharing about it, I really love to talk about how this organization, right, it gives way of over 40 years of research where we're looking at pregnancy, we're looking at birth, we're looking at infancy as not just these physical events, but these beginnings of our stories. And that research shows that these earliest experiences shape our physical health, they shape our emotional patterns, they shape how we feel safe coming into the world. And I think that APPA as an org, spending decades understanding this connection and being able to turn it into education for parents, for birth professionals, we all have our own birth story. And Kelly, you also mentioned this experience that I have, and Ashley, I know that you have this experience all too well as a doula too, that anytime someone finds out just the connection that any of us have into the birth space, they want to share their own birth stories. They want to share their understanding of birth. And I think it's such a natural um, human experience to want to talk about our our earliest pieces of life. And it gets people curious and it percolates a lot, I think, as we're talking about what these experiences look like as we've come into adulthood. And something I love about this work so much, and something I love to tell my clients as a doula is, none of this is stagnant. None of it is, it's not about having a perfect, and I'm using my quotes for anybody who are listening. It's not about having the perfect delivery. It's not about having the perfect birth. It's not about having the perfect pregnancy experience. It's about how this season shapes you as as a parent. It's about how the season shapes like your baby and just how important this prenatal and perinatal period is to, I don't know, becoming a big human in this world, and how important that can be. And one thing I love, Ashley, you were talking about like the practicality of how this has changed your clients' outcomes. I have the same kinds of experiences, and I love tasking some of my clients with some homework of like getting curious about their own birth story if they can, if they can talk to their parents and just what things have come up for them in their own birth and how that might play out in their birth of their own baby. And it is just, when I say it's like the most rewarding work, like that is it. It's the craziest work. Like it is, there's just pieces that get pulled in from everywhere. And it's such rewarding work to be able to go deep with a client who wants to go deep and to understand how far they can dig within themselves.
Yeah.
I love it.
Oh, Wendy, something you said, I kind of want to go back because I
Yeah.
love stories. I love the stories.
Yeah.
So I want to know, like you're like it's a normal conversation. Everyone's at the dinner table, like, so
Truly.
was your placenta tight or small over there? Like what does that mean for people going, what kind of conversations are you having about your birth? I'm like, can we
Yeah,
peek into that and get a little
totally,
easier?
totally. My mom and dad growing up were both, and my parents are still like this. They're big storytellers. They love the history of our familyhood. Both of my
Oh,
parents are very
love
much like
that.
the story holders of their families. Um, my dad is very big into genealogy. We have a huge family tree in our living room. And as we're talking about family stories, right, as we're talking about like our lineages and our histories, I got to grow up in the home that my great grandparents lived in. It was built in the 1930s, and my great grandparents lived in this home. And then my parents raised my sister and brother and I in this home. And when we're talking about like our birth stories, first of all, my mom and dad are both big photo people, so that I've seen plenty of photos of the
I've seen them
actual
too.
experience itself. So has Ashley.
Wow. You mean like of the actual birth?
Of the
Yes,
actual birth,
yes.
I have
I got to see
Wow.
Polaroids.
Wendy
So
being
that's
born.
so cool.
And I think that my parents were just never shy. I was a very inquisitive child.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, you know, when you're 3 and 4 and 5 and you're watching something on the TV and you're like, "Oh, like how was I born?" And I think
Aw.
I was also just very fortunate to live in a community where my parents were very close to the midwife that I was born with and that my sister was born with. And I really don't know how it would come up, but it just would come up very organically. And I think like my sister and I would also ask for it, you know, can you tell the story about how we were born?
Oh my
And
gosh, I love
they
that.
would
Were you born
go
at
into
home
this.
or no?
No, so
Hospital?
I was born in a hospital.
Okay,
They
but
were
with a
building,
midwife.
yeah, they were building the
Okay.
first birth center in Santa Rosa,
Wow.
California,
Wow.
and it was
Okay.
going to be built just after I was born. And my mom had a very intense experience in the early 80s with my brother's birth. She had an episiotomy. She had a very terrible doctor who, you know, had her labor alone and all these things. And so in the early 90s, when her and my dad had gotten together and I was, you know, coming into the world, my mom very much wanted a different birth experience. And you know, she comes from the hippie culture where she breastfed her babies and just knew that there was a different piece
Hmm.
to wanting to birth differently. Found a midwife and got to have these really beautiful conversations about the transformative piece of birth. And went into labor naturally with me, had a very quick labor, a very beautiful birth where and I'm stealing this right from my dad's language, but my mom pushed me out. I came out. I went right in onto their chest. I let out a little, "Meh," and then I just settled
Aw.
in. And he was like, "That's how you've been your
Wow.
whole life, is just like such a soul that is very secure and knows what she wants in life." And he's like, um you never squawk about anything. You're never like angry or any type of person, that you just like have come
Wow.
out and been so sure of yourself. And you know, it's an interesting juxtaposition, and I won't spend too much time on this, but my sister was born at 34 weeks. She was a breech baby. And, you know, we were regaled with this story of my mom had gone into early labor. My sister was breech. They had gone to the hospital, and my sister stuck her little foot out, pulled it back in, and the doctors were contemplating what to do. And my mom kept saying, "Wait for the midwife, wait for my midwife. Like she's gonna know what to do." And my sister's butt comes out and they're all like, "We're gonna push her back." All the doctors are saying, "We're gonna push her back in, we're gonna do an emergency C-section." And my mom is like, "No way." My dad is like, "No way." And then we're regaled with the story of like the midwife runs into the hospital, she sees what's going on, she picks my sister's butt up, and my sister slides right out. And you know, these are the stories that I'm growing up with, so of course they're going to influence the way that I've come into not just being in the birth world, but being in my life. You know, and I love it. And I tell them all the time how grateful I am to know those stories. And the more that I spend my time unpacking and learning more from APPA, the more I want to know about my own birth story in terms of like, who was there in the room? Who, you know, like
Mm.
what and I know, like in my birth, for example, I didn't have any Pitocin. There was nothing in that, you know, space. And so, like, it's the more uncovering that I continue to do well into my 30s has been so fun. And it's been such a beautiful preconception journey for myself and for my partner as we like continue to have these conversations. And I welcome anyone who's listening to like continue to just be curious. Like that's
Yeah.
the biggest piece of it, is just get curious.
I love that. I keep thinking in my head the Polaroids. Here, look at family dinner time. Let's pass the. That is so awesome, though. Come on. And I love that you have this story. You get to, it's such sunshine because my story was so
Yeah.
dark.
Yeah.
And you're actually, your story is like giving me something very powerful now.
Mm.
And then I look at like what you're doing now in birth psychology. It's like
Yeah.
how you're bringing it in. And there are so many curious like parts to look at and to see who we've become. And then your mission, both of your missions is like, okay, this is how we came. And there's so many different ways to be born. And some of us, yes, will be very traumatized from
Mhm.
mother, baby, but we work it out. Like I'm raising my hand over here.
Mhm.
We work it out, we figure it out. And I know those that are tuning in are probably like scared, right? It's like, I don't want to look at this. And something else you said, Wendy, I wanted to kind of bring forward into the conversation with all of us here is that sensing, feeling self of baby. There's no
Mhm.
language. And I feel like there's a fear in that for a lot of people of like, well, the baby doesn't have any words. They can't tell me how they feel, but they do tell you how they feel.
Mhm.
What can anyone say about that?
I actually would love to throw it to you, Ashley, because you have such a beautiful phrase that I love to borrow and pay you much homage to it. But I would love for you to take that question.
What is my phrase? Hold on a
Around that
moment.
babies are born smarter than they will ever be, and
They
that we just have
are.
to learn their language.
Hmm.
I mean, it's so true. I remember having a conversation with Raylene recently, who is our previous president here at APPA. Um, and she was talking about how she loves to point it in the way of a premature baby.
Mm.
So if your baby is born at 32 or 33 weeks, then you're still able to interact with them. They still know
Mm.
that you're there. And in the same way, when they're inside of your body, you can interact with them in those ways too. And I think personally, from like a feminine embodiment perspective, we have to be connected to our bodies in order to connect with our babies. So, like, the first things that I start off with are meditation, getting into your body, listening to music, those pieces, but really coming back to understanding that, you know, our verbal processing, talking about what we're doing throughout the day, connecting with baby, poking around at baby in the third trimester, talking to baby, all of these things are beneficial, and we have the science to back it. I mean, we're showing that babies who are participating in what we call prenatal bonding, which is essentially just connecting with your baby, talking to your baby, playing with your baby in the womb, these babies have better fine motor skills, better intelligence scores, better emotional intelligence scores, better relationships with mother at 1 year postpartum, and an easier transition into that postpartum period. So there's so much science that shows that our babies are learning from the very beginning. I mean, we have, I could go down so many study rabbit holes, but we've got studies involving playing a car horn and baby responding and reacting to that. We have studies where we're reading baby a book, the same book every night in the third trimester, and then you read it after they're born, skip a page, and they're agitated. I tell my clients all the time to sing the same song to baby every night before they go to bed. And that's part of their evening routine. And what happens is when you hit that witching hour and postpartum, they recognize the song and it settles them
Mm.
a little more. So, again, it's never too early to start connecting and bonding with your baby. And we have the science to show that it actually helps with their developmental process. They are learning just as much as we are.
And I know we're talking about that pregnancy, that moment, that connection, but when you're talking, I'm kind of going back even further.
Yes.
And I'm remembering some stories I heard in the pre and perinatal psych program
Yeah.
where I'm not even going to get it right, but they were doing IVF and
Mm-hmm.
there were nuns doing IVF. I don't know why it was nuns,
Mm.
but the spirit and the soul were there in the space. The baby was like, the embryo's there, but
Mm-hmm.
like, we have a lot of different ideas on that. So it's like that embryo, how had consciousness, it was there. There was a soul connection. And again, I can't even remember the details of this. And later on, there were things that this little being were connected to that were like almost, I swear, I don't know if I'm saying it right now, but it was like they were nuns, these black, like black shrouds, nuns. And they said this child was very much interested in people that were like in shrouds, and even Darth Vader came up. I don't know if you both know this story. And it was like I literally heard this in the pre and what I'm getting at is I am curious and of that before even of that nourishing and nurturing, that connection, even that embryo, like I don't know if any of you have seen studies on that or like what's even that, because a lot of we are in a culture of technology and there is a lot of intervention and especially a lot of women come to me and they ask me about the embryo, right? It's
Yeah.
like, I say it's life. It is literally life right there. And the
Yeah.
potentiality of a soul to come through, because some embryos don't make it, some do. What can you both
Well,
say
the
about
egg
that?
chooses, right? The egg chooses how this works, and I mean, we're now looking at when it comes to embryology, we're looking at new concepts like microchimerism,
Mm.
right? Where our babies are deeply connected with us in a way that we share, but like we share actual DNA with them forever,
Can
and
you
we're
define
even
that real
finding,
quick? Sorry, define
yeah.
micro, people don't know. Yeah.
Okay, so help me, Wendy, if I'm getting this wrong, but essentially microchimerism is a kind of like a melding of DNA in a way. And I remember recently one of our president of education, or vice president of education here at APPA, was talking to us about microchimerism specifically in regards to even connecting with uh, partners sexually and holding in their DNA for years and years, and that can show up in subsequent babies. So there's a lot of really cool new research that's talking about how interconnected we really are. And that, I mean, that really ultimately comes back to that's the biological expression, in my opinion, of interpersonal neurobiology, right? We're all connected. There is no disconnect. And and that's what I love about this subject, because it pulls me deeper into my own experience, not only my birth experience, my personal birth experience, but my births that I, my loss and my daughter and those pieces. It helped me name things that I had experienced that I had a difficult time expressing, because there was no, like Wendy said earlier, no language for that in regards to talking to your baby and communicating with baby. Um, I would really like to point out anybody who's interested in learning more about microchimerism, Dr. Ikagawa's work out of Japan is a really great place to start to dig into that information, and it's a fun rabbit hole to go down. But I keep thinking about a story, a personal story of mine, and in regards to my miscarriage and then my daughter's birth, that has forever floored me. And I didn't really understand the gravity of that until I started learning about birth psychology. Um, so when I had my daughter, I remember having a moment when I had my miscarriage. Before I had my miscarriage, I was having some difficulties, and I remember talking to my baby about how this was not good timing, and I was very
Mm.
stressed, and I didn't want her to be born into this environment. And I miscarried about a week and a half later. And
Mm.
for years and years, I could not even speak on that because I felt so much
Mm.
blame that I had asked my baby to leave. And she had listened to me. And I kind of like put that out for a very long time until years later when I went into therapy and processed all of those pieces out. But when my daughter was about 3 years old, and this was before I found birth psychology, like right before I found APPA, she looked at me one day and she said, "Mommy, I got to be in your tummy 2 times." And I'm like, "What?" Because I had never discussed that with her at all. I didn't talk to anyone about it really at the time. And I was like, "What? Tell me more." And she's like, "Well, I was in your tummy one time, and I didn't. You weren't ready. You weren't ready. So I had to go away, but I came back, and I came
Oh, that's
out."
amazing. This is
And that
my
was
kind of
really really
story.
cool to like really delve into the whole communication with baby prenatally. I mean, I was 18, 19 weeks gestation. And as we know from an early development perspective,
Mm.
babies can hear before they ever develop ears. This is a full nervous system experience, and that starts at 13 or 14 weeks. So being able to connect with baby in that way, and to see like years down the road that it all was deeply interconnected is so fascinating to me, and I'll never forget it.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a very big story because you're so open to receive it. I think that's the biggest piece because I
Mhm.
know a lot of mothers wonder about that. Like, is my baby going to be here? Is it not this birth loss? And I always tell women in birth loss, it's such a unique experience as your own is. And that's what you were meant to be a part of. But it's interesting with the gap of all those years you're working through your own turmoil and
Yeah.
uncertainty, and there's so much around that. And there's such a self-responsibility, I feel like, with birth loss because the mother feels like she's
Mhm.
done something wrong all the time. And it's
Hmm.
so much more. I always say there's a sovereign soul that has their own opinion. There's
Yeah.
another life. It's not just you going, "Oh, my arm hurts and I need to heal it." That's a part of you. It's like this that a whole other being in a person. And yeah, I know others will be very curious about that for themselves as well. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I think I mean, to really come back around, it really is a deeply interpersonal experience. And this is part of why I've loved integrating this education into my own community because I come from, I mean, my daughter was born in 2017. When I was going through childbirth education, we were being told your body is great. This is amazing. Here's the basics. Here's how to self advocate. And hubbies, you just sit over there and give her what she wants. This is her experience. And that's just absolutely untrue because
Mm,
their lived experience, their birth experiences, their early childhood development, their beliefs about life and functionality, all of those things will come up, even the ones that are buried in this transition.
mm,
So, integrating that for both parents and helping them understand that they're both functional participants in this process and that it's
mm-hmm.
directly affecting the development and growth of their future generations
Mhm.
has made it so much more fun because it helps us understand that we were never meant to do this alone. And this whole isolating effect of, oh, it's just about the woman and this is her thing and this is her weight to carry and the
Mm,
partner is just left out of it entirely, that's not only separating us from our families in this process, but it's also separating us from our own communities because we feel the weight of what we need to carry perfectly. And like Wendy said, this is about being human and being curious. And we know from what I learned in birth psychology that fear and love are what are the driving factors in humanity,
Mhm.
right? You've got your oxytocin and then you've got your cortisol and
mm,
adrenaline, right? And when we're moving through life from a place of fear, we're not curious, we're self-protecting. And
mm,
that is
mm-hmm.
doing nothing but shutting off our general oxygen supply to reality, right? So this opens it up in such a way that allows us to find a greater level of connection first and foremost within ourselves, but then to our babies, to our partners, to our families, to our communities so that we can really start rebuilding that piece that we've lost in Western culture.
Mm.
So I'm curious now. Let me see here. I wanna because something I got from your website. I wanna read this because I feel like, there's such deep science and you said like 40 years, there's so much research and things happening. And this is global. This is not just like, oh, I'm just here in my tiny little place, but it's like this is a big community of birth professionals. It sounds like medical doctors, midwives, healers, therapists, curious seekers, right? And so you have here on your website, I really like this. Imagine a world where all babies feel welcome, seen, nurtured, beginning in the womb, where all pregnant women feel fully supported throughout pregnancy, birth, and the postpartum time, where all support members of the birth process are educated about the impact of pregnancy and the birth throughout our lives. And I really wanted to share that because it's not just clinical, like, oh, the science of like psychology, and I don't know, but I want to hear with what whoever wants to share, just I know I just said all these people like birth workers, healers, like what do you see? Maybe I should even rephrase this. What do you see the structure of this bringing it more deeper into the world? Like
Mm,
in how is it gonna like really uplift and hold like the next generations even?
yeah. I mean, I like to say that birth psychology applies to anyone who's ever been born. We're
I
all
like
humans. We have all been
that.
born.
You're
We've
like, I'm
all
done. That's all I'm saying.
but
Oh, okay.
I mean, ultimately, again, this what you said in Wendy's bio, peace on earth begins before birth. You
I
know,
know I had to use that in the intro because it's on your site, it's in your
Yeah.
bio. I'm like, how amazing. Like,
that's
yeah.
something that I really like to point to our former executive director, Catherine Lightfoot. She's an amazing human, and that was her quote that we love to pull from.
Oh, okay. I feel like I've
But
seen that quote before, but I wasn't sure.
I mean, and it's so true because
Mm,
ultimately, we know from an anthropological perspective, and we pull from a lot of anthropology in this work, that that cultures who really honor the birth process, the prenatal and postpartum process, and care for their mothers and their babies in a communal way, actually have lower incidences of violence in their culture,
mm,
like as a whole. It's measurable at this point. And what we're looking at in Western culture is that we're further away from that than ever. Our healthcare costs are higher than they've ever been before, and our maternal and infant mortality rates are skyrocketing. We're higher than in the US, we're higher than anyone else in the developed world, and it's not getting better. We have 1/3 of women ending up in cesareans, and ultimately it's because we've been disconnected from our bodies. We've been disconnected from understanding how they operate and believing in their capacities, and because we have been hijacked by a system that is focusing more on efficiency than actually trusting the process and understanding that this is extremely physiologic. It's not something that needs to be medically managed all the time. You know, there's a time and
mm.
a place.
I mean,
But
that's the big thing. What you're
yeah,
saying there, Ashley, I mean, that's the whole the next discussion, right? That's a whole other podcast, by the way.
yes,
It's like,
please.
that whole, but I actually, you're just reminding me, I'm going to plug this for myself. I wrote a poem and it's called The Wars in the Birthing Room.
Mm,
Mm,
And it's a bit dark, I'm not gonna lie, but then there's some light in the end. And I will share it more publicly at some point, but it's pretty intense because there's things happening that feel to me a disappointment in like, okay, consciousness, and even in a developed country, like, why are we still doing this? Why, and I've seen women come back to nature, like pure nature. I'm gonna go to the next deepest level. Like, I think we have to birth where our consciousness is.
mm,
So
exactly.
free birth, home birth, birth center, hospital birth. I'm reversing the order now because I think women get scared when I say, look at free birth, look at unassisted birth. You don't have
Mm-hmm.
to do it, but look, put that in your field, put that nature and
Mm-hmm.
nurture into your being and like see where it goes. I feel like to give baby the best, to give mother the best of that start. And yeah, but see, yet we're still locked in a system. I know there's again a whole other
Well,
podcast.
you're so right. It's all about curiosity and connection and honoring. And we have to meet ourselves where we're at. I had a conversation with a beautiful human that I met through APPA, Chai. I cannot remember what her last name is, Wendy.
love,
Um,
which is so
Chai
appropriate.
Love.
Uh-huh.
And she's a former obstetrician who has gone to be very holistic. She lives in Costa Rica and has had 4 beautiful,
Mm,
beautiful unmedicated births in nature. And I was talking to her about birth philosophy and how beautiful that was, and explaining my own experience and my mother's experience and her
mm.
mother's experience. And she was like, that
Wow.
is where it is. She's like, I'm
Yeah.
extremely privileged, and I want to acknowledge that from an epigenetic perspective. That my past generations, my mother, my grandmother, my great grandmother, I'm multi-generational home birther, and I feel safe and
Whoa, multi-gener.
ecstatic about
Wow.
birth because it has always been safe and ecstatic within my bloodline.
Mm,
And that is
Oh,
something that we
wow.
really have to be honest with ourselves, and understanding that we can't expect to have an orgasmic birth when we just found out what birth psychology was in our 3rd trimester and are just
Mm-hmm.
learning about what our bodies are moving through. This is a lifelong process of feminine embodiment and really reconnecting with that power within us, and understanding that this is multi-generational and we're just doing a little bit better than the last generation did, and that's all we can ask of ourselves.
mm,
Wow, it's so powerful you're talking about. I never really think much about the generational linking
Mm-hmm.
in like because a lot of information gets lost in time too. Like we don't have our stories, right? But that woman has her stories, which is so phenomenal to like really look at and go, wow, like what are we bringing in? I'm doing this observational study, we'll call it, of children I'm noticing that are born. at home with zero intervention, maybe they're not even washed and they have no injections,
Mhm.
they're different. I'm sorry, like they're different. Not to minimize children that have gone through, beat up and gone through, a lot of intervention and, injections. It's different. It's giving their body and stress and the nervous system a completely different outlook. And I am so freaking curious because energetically, I'm seeing something very different with children like that. And again, I'm not minimizing. I think all children are so beautiful and amazing. And some of them have to really fight in the beginning of their birth. But I'm just being openly curious. Like, I do look at these children and I go, and there's not a lot of children like that. And I go,
Yeah.
what will that little human become? I want to know. What
Yeah.
will they grow? Or will they be? I grew up very sick.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at that going, will that kid just be like healthy, like just naturally, like their immunity,
Well, I
or
think
will
that
there be a, yeah,
Yeah, I think that they're being set up for a much
set up, yeah.
easier movement through
Mm,
life. It doesn't mean that they are going to be any more or less sick
Yeah.
than children born in a less than ideal setting, right?
Mm,
But that initial imprinting
yeah.
does affect us. And ultimately, like looking at Ray Castellino's work on the social field and then being born into a calm microbiome, right? Where
Mm,
they're imprinting safety and connection as their first moments of experience outside of the womb. And then we have to come back to what that old paradigm looks like within the
mm,
medical model, that they are still teaching. This is actively still in textbooks and it's outdated from a scientific perspective, that
mm,
that babies don't remember before the age of 2. So these medical professionals are in a very fast-paced environment. They've been taught that babies don't remember. We can do whatever we need to with them. We don't have to talk to them or explain to them what's happening, or make them feel less pain in the process.
mm,
And all of that exposure that you're talking about, the poking and the
mm.
prodding and the
Yeah.
not treating them as if they're already
mm,
human to begin with
Yes.
autonomy, is directly affecting that early imprinting. And that does not mean that a baby born in that environment, I was born in a military hospital, cannot find their own healing in that process. I also think that we kind of choose what we're coming into, and we know what pathways we're going to be working through as we move through our own lives.
Okay, I want to redo my contract. Can we go back and like redo it because I'm like not doing it. I don't like it. Which is why I'm on a mission for babies to be born. But I had to
Right?
kick ass with my own lineage because this is
I'm telling
interesting.
you.
My mother was born at home. She was home birth, but I was told
mm,
it's because they were poor. So the
Yeah.
consciousness was
mm,
different. And it
Yeah.
was like you to be born in the 40s, you had the hospital was the best place to be. It was like,
Mm-hmm.
but they were like, no, but she also had a lot of other things happening. She had abuse and stuff, all
Yeah.
kinds.
mm,
So then, she births me and my brothers, and it was terrible, actually, very terrible for her. And I kind of like come up to my own birth portal of my own sons, and I'm going, there's a lot to work with here. Like I knew that. I could
Yeah.
feel it psychically that something
Yeah.
was off. And it was, yeah, my first birth was traumatic, but luckily I was still able to vaginally birth and all that. But it was a very deep healing. But I knew it was a changing of a lineage.
Mm-hmm.
mm,
And I was
And
like, oh my freaking what? And then
yeah.
with my second born was like, I think if I kept having babies, it gets better. But
Yeah.
I'm like stopping. But with the second, it was like incredibly like peaceful. I was actually
mm.
orgasmic. I didn't try to do that, by the way. So
Wow.
there was a rift in reality somewhere that shifted that I knew that I'm changing the birth stories of, and I'm hoping, and my sons move on and they didn't have like any interventions and like what will their future children be? I don't know.
Mm.
If even, who even knows? But it's like I think we can all do better to create the best gentle foundation and
Mhm.
work towards the healing. Wendy, what can you say about that?
Well, I really resonate with pieces of both of your statements here, Ashley and Kelly, because I'm sitting here and I'm listening and hearkening back to something that we were talking about earlier, where it's not the place, home is not always the perfect place for birth, right?
Exactly.
You can never have the perfect birth, but it's how you're coming into these experiences and what your understanding is, as we're again talking about like these lineages pieces that are being passed on through what's being held in your body, what's coming in through your mind, and understanding that can be so helpful for moving through your own birth of your own babies, or really coming back to understanding what that experience was for you during that time.
Mhm.
um, it's interesting because I've been having these like kind of mini thoughts coming in about another really beautiful phrase that we like to use at APPA, which is womb ecology is world ecology, right? And what I really think about is a couple of pieces. One is how the way that we experience our first environment, right, in the womb really shapes and sets the pattern for how we treat our environments afterwards, when we come earthside. Our family, our community, we can go even bigger, right, into globally or planetarily. Like, how are we treating our planet? Um, but I also really like to think
Mm.
too about the womb itself as its own ecological environment. Um, Having our hormones, the signals, like our own microbiome, understanding how to manage and mitigate stress if you have are in a particularly stressful environment, and how all of that is in constant exchange between mom and baby, between like what's happening in our world. And I'm just like really sitting with that because it's so pertinent into what we're having a conversation about. And I'm like sitting here just like
Mm.
percolating on a lot of that.
Yeah, there's so much more to say, but we're coming to the end now, and I want to hear, ways that people can follow you or find you or even join APPA, not just APPA, but your own, like your own work and their own curiosities, whoever wants to share ways to best. Yeah.
Can I take that a
Yes,
little bit, Ashley? Just
go for it.
like we've been talking this entire time, right? APPA has been an organization with over 40 years of research. We have beautiful educational and teaching hubs where we do teach and educate on prenatal and perinatal psychology. We have a lovely intensive program called Prenatal and Perinatal Education Program, where you can go in depth and learn about these things. Ashley, you mentioned it's 185 hours. You'll have a mentor to kind of shepherd you along that journey and really like allow you to percolate on different things that are coming up for you through these 12 different modules. We also have tons of different, much shorter courses than a 12-month course, but much shorter for you to just kind of pick and understand what pre and perinatal psychology is, what birth psychology is. You can learn from our founders here at APPA and just all these different pieces. So I'm sure, Kelly, you'll include like our link to our website in our show notes. Um, Ashley and I are happy to share our emails as well if you just want to get in touch with us in terms of like questions about APPA or questions about that. Ashley, maybe you can talk a little bit about like how accessible we are on social media and how you can chat with
Oh,
us in our
yes.
DMs and all that good stuff
Please,
too.
yes, join us on social. We've been going live a lot. We have some really great educational information that we're putting out there, and I always love having a conversation via DM. So like, please connect with us. We're so excited to talk about our favorite subject.
Yeah, I think also one thing that Ashley and I have been on such a big mission about as being some younger folks in APPA and really seeing how deeply we can integrate this into our own communities as doulas and our own personal work.
Mhm.
One thing I love, we do a free summit, we call it Birth Psychology Month. It's in March. It's every March. And so it's always just a great way to kind of like sit and percolate and like understand how this might be in your own personal work. So we always just like to invite folks to mark that on their calendars to come join Ashley and I through the entire month of March.
It's
But that
our
we're
favorite
we're
month.
forever, yeah, it's truly like our favorite month. We look forward to it. But just that we're forever doing different joint ventures and courses with all different kinds of people from every single walk of life. We're currently doing our Black Heartbeat series with our amazing programs coordinator, Shatia Owsley. She's really highlighting some amazing voices in the community to talk about birth from many, many different lenses. And so there's always different ways to just get in touch with us. And like Ashley said, Instagram, Facebook are always the first place that you ever want to go to find out more about what we're doing.
And then that is also birthpsychology.com if people are like so eager to kind of check into that. And I wanted to share that I've been on APPA's live and I've been invited to events to speak and Instagram, which has been really awesome. And I encourage people to join membership, but even if you don't join membership, join the email list. And it's so full of great stuff and different events and things that are coming up. I wanted to share, ladies, I'm not sure if we talked about this, but it says 10% off payment plan with a code. Is this
Yeah.
something?
Yes,
Yeah.
we would love to offer for our prenatal and perinatal education program in particular. We would love to offer a gift for anyone doing any of our payment plans. We know that this is definitely an investment into your education to learn more. And so we would love to just offer a gift. We are calling it Spirit Baby 10. So anytime that you're using any of our checkout links, you can drop in our the code of Spirit Baby 10 and get 10% off any of our different payment plans.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. And yes, that will be in the show notes. That will be shared everywhere. And thank you so much, Ashley and Wendy, for being here. This was really amazing.
Thank you for having us,
Kelly.
Kelly. Happy to be here.
And I want to thank everybody for joining episode 251, August 2026. Peace on Earth begins at birth, the global contributions of birth psychology. Thank you for joining Spirit Baby Radio with your host, me, Kelly Meehan. Please join my community and stay in touch with monthly energy rants, Spirit Baby poetry, and get access to Spirit Baby 101 with tips and practices at my newsletter at newearthchildren.com. And join me on Instagram with lives at Spirit Baby Medium, and join the Mighty Networks, the Spirit Baby Collective membership, and Motherhood to Mediumship. Remember, you are the heart that holds communication, and it is your time to connect. Come share in the great shift of your mind and the true spirit of your heart with Spirit Baby Communication.